Welcome to the Deep Magic Seminars. This is the final session in the No Shuffling Allowed course. Well done for getting through the other three. This is the final one. Great, we're all here. And again, no shuffling is allowed today. We're going to go through a number of different techniques, all in the hand stuff, as you'll see in the course notes. We're going to be looking at an old school favorite. We're going to then come back to it at the end with a kind of a new variation on it, or a different way, not necessarily a new variation, a different way of doing it, which I think you'll like. We're going to look through some variants of the push-through shuffle. We're also going to look at a very, very bold shuffle, again, related to those kind of old school shuffles based on the Zarrow shuffle. And of course, we'll be also examining an effect in the most kind of bold way possible. Lots of stuff. And there'll be no shuffling. No. So let's begin. Full shuffles. This is what we've been doing for this whole course. And like I said, these are on the table. And when it comes to doing full shuffle work, one of the most important things, as always, isn't just doing it perfectly, but it's also kind of the setup, how you get in and out of it. The kind of the psychology that is around it, why you're using that shuffle in that space. Now, we're not going to really go into too much detail on that stuff. This particular course has been much more about focused on the specific techniques of those shuffles, but you do have to bear that in mind. If you are doing some stuff in the hands, then all of a sudden you put the cards on the table and shuffle them in that way. You have to make sure that it contextually makes sense, so, or at least match your full shuffle to the normal shuffle, legitimate shuffle that you're using in that particular routine or whatever it is. You do have to think about the styles. The point is, if you've got a lot of these different styles at your fingertips, you have a lot of full shuffles in your so-called back belt, your magic belt. Probably is someone out there with a magic belt, and I bet they've got like different decks of cards in it, and they just whip it out. And you know what? No, don't do that. Same as playing card ties or anything with playing cards on that involve, any clothing, basically. Stop all of it immediately. Wear it for fun. Take it from gifts from family members and go, thank you very much. Then put it in the bin. That's just how we roll right now. So we're going to start looking at this first shuffle, which is an old school favorite, really. You'll recognize elements of this immediately. There's a reason why I want to do this, because there's a very interesting thing about it that I like, a couple of interesting things about it. We'll talk about half of that going in, and then towards the end, we'll come back to it. All right. So we're going to start. And this is what this looks like. So it looks something like this. Like this. Okay. Now what I love about this particular shuffle, this is a real old school shuffle and obviously keeps everything intact. This is one of those kind of shuffles that you would see someone do a full shuffle that couldn't do full shuffles, or they would just have this like really bad version of a full shuffle that they would do on their leg or something at some weird angle. I, weirdly enough, have always really liked it, because to me it looks really real. There's something, and it's also completely covered. It's very, very old, and the principle's very, very bold. But there's another reason why I want to talk about this, because it's a really good shuffle that transitions from the hands to the table. So a lot of full shuffles where you put the cards on the table and do the full shuffle, where you do it in the hands, this transitions to the table. So what's good is you can start the shuffle in the hands and it ends up on the table. So in this case, we're going to be here. We're starting this shuffle. We're pushing these together. And now they're on the table. So now if you spread them in this arc, you've gone from the hands to the table in this position very, very quickly. And these have all stayed in order. Now, what I like about this shuffle is the kind of, what's the word? Like the kind of squabbled nature of it, right? But it's basically angle proof. So if you're in an environment where you are surrounded, you've got no problems with this shuffle. This shuffle also will work with any style of cards. Really, you can't muck this shuffle up to some extent. The cards, you don't need really beautiful conditioned cards, because the nature of the handling, it means that the cards are just going to go in on top of the halves are going to go back on top of each other, and you won't have a problem. But like I said, it also looks quite real to me. If you do this in the real world, no one will pay any attention whatsoever. It just looks like exactly what it is. You hear the riffle as well. You see the thing start, and you hear 1, 2, and then these are pushed together, and that's exactly what you would imagine it would look like. all right? And yet obviously everything is still in order. So we're going to go through parts of the technique on this. And there's also another reason why I want to do this is because we're going to come back to this at the end of the shuffles today for part 2 of this shuffle. But I don't want to go into part 2 yet because it's like something else. So this is kind of like half of this shuffle that we're going to look at now. And at the end, we're going to come back to part 2. So, and like I said, having all of these shuffles in your back belt are really important, right? In your armory. Because it means that under any condition, you can kind of do all kinds of things. You can fit in with the style. It makes sense. I love this shuffle. So this is what this looks like. Let's do this. So we're going to shuffle off half. So into the hand like this. And basically what's going to happen, I'll do this from above so you can follow much easier. But basically what's going to happen is these are going to be riffled into each other. And then you're going to grip all of this half out. And you're basically going to twist your hands apart like this. Okay? It's not exactly like that. Well, it's a bit more refined than that. But you basically twist them apart. Okay? And then you just put them one on top of the other and they're full blocks. And then bring your hands together. Now, I'll go through the kind of refinements on that. But this is a very, very kind of refined shuffle. Sorry, not refined shuffle, like a very, very reliable and practical shuffle. And you don't need a surface. And you've created this impression of a riffle shuffle, and it ends here. So let's go over. Oh, hello, Orange. So let's go over here so we can get this right. So this is it in slow motion. Okay. See this here? Okay. And also what's good is it kind of leaves these looking often a little bit like this, which is good. And now they're in this position ready for the table. So I'll go over the handling on this. If you look at this at full speed, you see the kind of speed on this. But I really, really like it. Now, I know that there's a few people out there that are going to be thinking, oh, hang on, there's, you know, it looks a bit casual. You know what I mean? It looks a bit almost amateurish. But I think that is almost entirely our perspective on it. There is still this moment here, this riffle, and these are going into each other. It still feels exactly like you want it to, and it's perfectly deceptive. You just want to not flash from any angle. And I've seen people do this and flash. Where the hand goes on top and you kind of see it. What you want to do is the opposite of that, of have it where from each angle you look at, it basically gets covered. So these fingers all basically cover it. So you can't really see this. I mean, you can, if we come to this angle actually here, which might technically be the worst angle here. Even this at full speed here, I mean, already it's almost impossible to see. If you really look closely and I slow down, but it's over so quickly that you can't really see anything happening. So let's have a look at this from above slowly. So I'm going to riffle this into one hand. I've got, if you can get these deeper, it might be a little bit easier. Okay. I'll go over how to do this if you do have the cards more at your fingertips. All right. Which is normally the way you might see this done. All right. When these are more at the fingertips, this is where you have to kind of move the fingers underneath a bit more, and you can flash, right? So instead, we're not going to do that. We're going to have these much deeper in the hands, right? If you watch that again, look, these go up into that deep position very quickly. We covered this before to get so that it doesn't really feel like you shoved them in. It's they glide up. And then I take half off, okay? Here. We're going to come in and riffle these corners in. Now, what I also want to do is I want to start with a bed on this left-hand half. This is the bottom half. It's where the King of Diamonds is, all right? So I'm going to put a bed here. Okay. And I also like to leave this on top. Makes it easier. It means it doesn't have to come out. And as you now force your hands round, you're going to basically grip this both sides like this. You could technically let go. We don't. You're going to grip the sides, okay? So in this position, I'm not going to let go, but you could. And what's going to happen is you're going to basically like force these back corners apart, okay? And the way in which we're going to do that to make it a little bit easier, I'm going to push almost like imagine you were ripping, I don't know, a phone book, a cinder block. or a piece of paper. Imagine you were ripping something in half, right? That's what we're going to do. We're going to have this action of this. We're kind of doing this a bit, but also that they're coming apart by my left hand going slightly more down, just a little bit. And now, and as a result, it's just, you just feel them unweave at this bottom corner, right? And as this happens, you can then put one on top of the other, okay? Right, but it kind of actually happens a little bit. Let me try this again, just so you can slow this down. In this corner here, I'm starting to pull these apart. Now I drop these on top. I try to get this thumb out of the way if possible, and these go on top. Now from your angle, right, this is not going to look great. I mean, look, if you're looking at what I'm seeing here, you can see, I can literally see those go on top. Okay. But it's pretty much impossible to see from almost every other angle. It's also one of those shuffles that, that's going to sound a bit crazy, but it kind of feels like you're doing a full shuffle. Like in your head, as you're doing it, it feels so clunky, like you're just taking it out and putting it on. It almost makes you feel that it is not as deceptive as it is. Whereas in reality, if you just push these together, it just feels like you've riffled them. I see that riffle and then these hands pushing. I really like it. Just one more time. In fact, let's go from this angle. That is going like this. We put that bed down into that corner. We grip these sides. I've already now got these out. And now these ones are going down as these ones are coming in on top. Right. And then these are put together. All right. So we have here. All right. And these are in position. And this is why I put this in the course pack as an old school shuffle. It's one of the first kind of full shuffles I saw done live right in front of me when I was younger. And there was just an element of realism about it. It just doesn't feel like something false, in my opinion. I've used it many times, especially if you're in like an environment, like a pub type environment, or where, you know, if all of a sudden to kind of do a refined full shuffle or something on the table just doesn't quite feel right. You might not want to bridge them in the hands. You might want to kind of almost step everything down a notch. Just kind of make it just that bit more casual. It just blends in and no one even notices. It's almost, I'll tell you what, the other thing I like about this, you do most bridge shuffle or most kind of riffle shuffles in the hand with a cascade or a bridge or whatever it is, they do attract attention. They, especially when they've got some spring action in them, or when we were doing like these types of shuffles before where you're actually springing them and you can see those cards weaving. But what I like about this is it feels like a shuffle that anyone could do. Like it just feels like it's not that impressive. It doesn't feel like, no one's going to go, wow, okay, you could do a riffle action with a spring there. It's just, they see the riffly bit, but it kind of makes sense. And that's, I think, what I love about it. You know, it's almost like when we were talking about these shuffles last week. Do you remember these ones? We were angling backwards. It's kind of half related to those. And so this is a kind of a crossover from those into this one. But this is much more the kind of traditional, almost identical to that traditional form of shuffle that I saw when I was growing up. So yes, I love this. I just call this a kind of an old school full shuffle, really, more than anything else. There are references to it in print in places, but it's very difficult to track down because it's so old. But yes, we will come up to part 2 of that in a minute. So now we're going to look at a more refined shuffle. We're going to look at the push through shuffle and a couple of things that I think will make it more deceptive in one case, or overcomes a problem, and the other is a handling of the push through that might make it easier for those of you that don't do a push through shuffle and find it difficult when the cards bind and you have that friction of those cards going through each other. And it's a shuffle that I call the block shuffle, so we'll be going over that as well. So let's do these. Here we go. So this is the first part. Let's try this. I think this should be right now. Okay, that's the basic idea here. We'll extend this up a little bit. Okay, push these through each other, square those up, and give them a cut. And we have those in order. Okay. Okay, for those of you that are taking side bets, just so you know, like this. Now, to all intents and purposes, I'm trying to do this extra slow right now. This is going to look very, very normal, all right? But there's something else going on, right? And what this is to do with the speed at which this is going through the deck, all right? So normally with any normal riffle shuffle, you have they get pushed in and pulled apart, and you have this idea of kind of simulating friction. Yes, so you're always, as you're pushing those in, you're trying to simulate that friction. What we're going to try and do is simulate that friction in a new way. All right, so by doing that, what we can do is we basically slow down the entire operation. So instead of doing this at full speed, we can do this slower. So here's what we're going to do here. We're going to do this very, very slowly. So the normal push through action is like this. I'll expose this for now. And we pull these through, or push these through, and these go up here, I believe. Yes, it's weird doing it like that. But yes, so these are basically going to go through each other. Okay. And there's a lot of kind of arguments as to how do you do that? Do you do it like the Vernon style where you're pushing through? Do you do it like a speed through where you go through very, very fast? So as you get to this position, you just do everything all in one and then do some strip cuts, which is okay. And it's the way that I used to do it for the longest time. Okay. But we're not doing that now, right? Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to basically do the whole thing slowly, right? So and doing it slowly is what simulates the friction. Because normally what happens with these types of things, we have to like push in, but what we're going to do is just do the whole thing really slowly. Okay, so we can get to here, and instead of now trying to kind of simulate anything or push things through fast, so I call this the slow through, we're just going to start doing this, but just do it really slow. And in doing it really slow, it simulates that friction. Okay, now I'm going to go into it. Now we can come through and actually cut those out, but what I'm going to talk about in a second is another way of actually conditioning those cuts. All right, so let me use another deck for a second because I'm actually going to shuffle these. So here's what we're going to do, right? When you actually shuffle cards, okay, like this, there is a certain element of friction involved, and it's quite hard to simulate that often. So what often we have is that to do a push through, it's either done fast or we try and simulate it or we cover it. But what we're going to do with this slow through is intentionally, it's hard to kind of open it, but we're going to go through really slow. Okay, I'm trying to do it at the extreme, but we're going to push through really slowly. And in that action, when we then take these out the other side, we've kind of essentially made it feel like we're simulating that friction. So like this. Okay, now I'll go through the exact handling on the positions of the fingers in a second, but this is the idea of that slow through, is to just actually push it through in a really, really slow manner. And the second your fingers feel it on the other side, that's when you take it out. Okay, so we're gonna have this, like this, and like this. All right, this is, I'm kind of half trying to expose this here. So it's going through really, really slow. That might be better from this angle. It's going through really, really slow. I'm trying to expose this. And the second it comes out this other side, try and do it like this. The moment it's come out this other side, that's when you take it out. So this pushing action, you're not having to fake the pushing action anymore to simulate that friction. What you're doing is you're just doing it really slow. And it feels like a much more natural way, in my opinion, of simulating that friction. So, because I'm not actually trying to act and simulate that friction, I'm just doing it slowly. You understand what I mean? So this is why I call this the slow through. Because I always feel that whenever I try and act that friction, you either do it too much or too less or too little, and it's just, I don't know, it never quite feels right. So I discovered that if I just do this whole thing very, very slowly, once these start going through, it feels much more like those have been shuffled, okay, or you know, in a legitimate way, okay. So So what we're trying to do is simulate that friction that happens in shuffles. And so we're going to get this, and we're just going to go through slow. And that's the point in that, right? So that's that first bit, that which I think is really interesting. Now, before we do that, I'll actually go through the technical positions of the fingers on the push through as well, just so that we could do that. But I wanted to kind of explain that concept first, so we understand what is actually going on there. So the basic idea for me with the push through is, and there's lots of different ideas about what if you basically keep one half still and one wobbles through it, if they both move. I don't, to be honest, I often just have both slightly move. So both halves both slightly dip. I like it. And what's going to happen is we're going to do a shuffle. So let's say that we cut the top half to the left, as you can see here. So I'm going to cut the top half to the left. I'm going to start shuffling. I'm going to leave a bed first on my left, and then end on the right on here. I start pushing in, and once we get to about here, somewhere around there, it's not exactly sure where, my third fingers are going to be on this outside edge here. Okay, my thumbs are at the back here, which kind of maintains this control over the whole back part of the deck here. What's going to happen is my third fingers are going to push the outside of both packets, and they're going to basically start to angle. And my thumbs kind of let go and relax a bit, which allow both, because if you're only pushing those outside corners and you're pushing evenly, both packets can really only do that. Same as if they weren't actually woven. If you just put them side by side and you just do this, that's all that can happen. If you push in the middle, they move towards each other. If you push on the outside, they angle downwards. So that's what this is. We're here, we get to here, and then we push through. Instead of doing it in one motion, or instead of trying to do it fast, or instead of trying to do it to split into the next shuffle, what we're going to do is we're going to shuffle those, and we're just going to do it real slow. It's very difficult to do this. In fact, I might be able to do this from this angle, actually. This might be better. You watch how slow that side disappears when you get that finger out of the way. So it's literally like this fast, right? And the moment that it appears out of this side and I've got a grip on it, that's when I cut. Okay, so that's when we can come through and do that cutting action. It's very, very, and you can cut this forward. Sorry, let's do this way. Okay, so this is the basic idea, all right, of doing it very, very slowly. It's why I call it the slow through. Just pop to here, very, very slowly. And the slow, you're not trying to simulate the friction. That's the point. You're not trying to fake anything. You just do it slow. And in doing it, it's naturally doing it for you. It feels like you have pushed those in and you've simulated that friction. Now, you're then going to cut them. Now, again, it's hard to know whether you're going to cut face up, face down, you know, what exactly, sorry, if you're going to do multiple cuts or if you're going to do a single cut forward. And dependent on where you cut left or right or which side is which, it will depend on how you want to orientate that, okay? However, what I am going to say is this, which I really like, which is that with this shuffle, I do this thing called conditioning cuts. So I think of, if you look at the shuffle itself, we think of the full shuffle being the bit where we put them together and then we cut and then all great, it's all back in order. Now the problem is that sometimes the cutting action is the sneaky bit, and it's the bit that often looks weird. So what we want to do is make that look less weird by conditioning that action before we start. All right. So what I try to do, let me actually mix these up. So what I try to do is I'll do cuts like this. You see how now those cuts now look really normal because of how we conditioned the first cuts. So I look at these as just an important part of the full shuffle. This is actually something you can do with a lot of shuffles. So I could just call these conditioning cuts. It's the cuts you do before, which are there to help how the shuffle looks after, okay? So if my full shuffle, if we say this particular action, all I'm going to be doing is coming round and I need to put these on top. let's say. What I want to have is I want to condition that same style of action first. So here I'm just doing a running cut in that same style around a break. So up, hold a break, under, up, hold a break. So I just do that 2 or 3 times in that same style. Now when I hit this shuffle, go through slowly, it's got that exact same style. So those cuts before have really helped this thing afterwards. All right. So these are what, like I said, what I call conditioning cuts. And you can pretty much do this with almost any series of full shuffles, whether it's Zarros or push throughs or strip outs, whatever it is. There's normally in some way, some part of that action that you're trying to simulate at the end. So you want to really look at that first bit you do and consider that part of the full shuffle. If you don't think it's part of the full shuffle, then I think you're missing an opportunity to get some extra deception in there. You have this same thing with like when you're doing false cuts in the hands, right? What are you doing? You really want to get this to look right? So at some stage you want to make sure that, anyway, I'm waffling, you kind of get the idea. So here goes, right? Now let's try and do this way. Let's try here. Let's go back to this one. Let's try with these. So now, okay, so this shuffling is just a cutting technique, which is basically going to allow me to get that action in, okay? Yep. Now, do the slow through. Now, if I want to do multiples now, everything's now in order, all right? So everything's in order, so now I can just continue. But what we could do is we could do that slow through and then do strip cuts, like bottom strip cuts. But often I think that strip cuts are very difficult and tricky to get looking right at the best of times. They really are. And so often I think just doing single cuts like this looks great. Like I really believe that just kind of getting that cut action down will just look perfect each time, okay? So it's a really tricky thing to kind of think about, like the cuts that you do before, how you do the shuffle, how it all looks together, still having that kind of flexibility at the heart of it, but like I said, having that kind of controlled sense of you know, the rhythm and the pace and how everything looks. And so using those conditioning cuts and then having that slow through idea, I think it really does help simulate that friction. I see a lot of these types of shuffles. I don't want to do this because I can't do this shuffle. I'll actually mix them up. But a lot of these basically where it's very tight, right? And then there's this quick action or so, and it all feels very stiff. And I've never liked that. So I don't really do those types of shuffles, but these things, you know, where you get it all very, very tight and stiff, and then there's this quick action. So like I said, this is very, very light, slowly goes through. You can do those types of shuffles if you want, but most of the time we can just get this cutting action. All right. So now there's another type of shuffle that's in this same type of space. Which again is a push through, but one of the problems that people have with push throughs often is that binding, that friction. So if we look at this position, if we really shuffle those in together, okay, and we spread them, in fact, let me do this as evenly as possible. You know, this position means that there's a lot of friction that exists throughout the deck, and so it does actually become problematic to actually try and sorry, I appear to have been sweeping chimneys, so I've just noticed black soot. It's from lighting a candle. A lot of the problems are the friction that comes from the way in which those cards have been pushed together. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a shuffle where this kind of isn't the case, even though it looks like it. Okay, so let's do this again, like this. Now we can do this same slow through concept if we want with this. Doesn't matter, and this will still, of course, keep everything intact. Okay, so what this is we go from here where we have all this friction, and now when we push through, we've got a lot of friction coming through, and cards might move. What instead we're going to do is this. This looks almost the same, right? This looks the same. If we look at the structure of this shuffle, this is what it looks like. Okay. It looks fine, but actually if you see it, you'll see these big blocks. Okay. This is why I call it the block shuffle. And this means that now when we do a push through, there's almost no friction. Just glide through each other. Okay. So I'll go through that handling in a second. And we can use exactly the same things as the slow through. We can do these same movements like this and just drop those on top, which I really like, by the way. So I'll often do with this particular shuffle, I drop like this. So I'll do a couple of shuffles. In fact, let's do this with these. Okay. So I'll actually do a couple of these types of dropping actions, right? And then do this block shuffle and do that drop. And the way in which those drop on, this really feels, to all intents and purposes, like the cards are a bit out of control. It feels very blocky, like they're just dropping down on top. I think it feels very natural, very open. It doesn't have this kind of like, it's not tense when you're going through here. So for those that do struggle with the push through, this particular shuffle is good. I also use this sometimes if my hands don't feel fully in stroke or the surface isn't great. It means that it's a bit easier to manage if the temperature's not right. If you know, there's a lot of ways to do it. So I'll go through the kind of exact handling on this now. So here's what we're going to do: is we're going to split, and we're going to lift up immediately on half of the cards on this side, and I'm going to riffle half on, and then I'm going to drop these and then drop these. But if you watch this shuffle, look how it doesn't look like that's what has happened. The key, do you remember we were talking about the shape shuffles, and the key is the mirroring and the timing and getting it looking right? It's exactly the same with this. Now, obviously these are being shuffled now, that's why I'm using these, but you can see how it doesn't look like, it doesn't look like that. We don't want anything like that. It has to look like, okay, and yet we have this block nature. And the key for that is, really is to start the shuffle halfway. So you don't riffle this first block. So straight away now you don't have riffle, then riffle. So what you do is you immediately start, let's try this from above, is we're going to immediately start halfway up. And as I'm lifting halfway up, I'm lifting up here as well. So you see I'm mirroring this action. Now, as this is raising, we're doing nothing. This hand is riffling. Yeah, and now what I do is I just drop. See what I mean? So now really, you've only really riffled one section in a way. You've actually only riffled from one side, and that's on the right for one moment, and then dropped the others. What you're not doing is riffle, riffle, and then in. So it's you lift and then drop. Okay, so I'm going to cut, in this case, sorry, I want to do this again. So I'm going to cut the top over to my left, lift up on half. As it's lifting up, these are riffling in, and then I drop like that. And the key as well, if we do this from the side here, you'll see it doesn't look like, it looks like those top halves drop at the same time. You see, look, that's not, you know, I'm not just actually shuffling them. You know, these are going into those block positions. Looks like that, and yet those are in those positions. Now look, if you see here, look, see how actually there, just marginally, that there it started to shuffle. See here? It wasn't 4 blocks, but it doesn't matter because you're still going to push these through anyway. You understand what I'm saying? So you're still pushing those sections through, and there's still almost no friction as a result. So, but largely, generally, there won't be any. You can see the actual block on the side here. That's what it looks like. So now when you start pushing those through, you can go slow. They just glide through each other because there's basically no friction. Now, when you take these out as well, they kind of come out in a very blocky manner. Sometimes when you do a push through shuffle of any sort, when they come through, they kind of like morph through. Sometimes you have this weird like look as the cards go through each other. When you have this this position like this, as these go through each other, come out, they look more blocky, so you'll see a block on top. So it just kind of, for me, especially when you drop and stuff like this, it just feels, much nicer. Like this. And that block position. Okay. All right. So those two styles of shuffles are really going to help with elements of the kind of like aspects of the deceptive elements that are at the heart of doing a push through or a strip out shuffle. Normally with the push through or strip out, there's something in it that's a giveaway. And so the two things for me is often that moment that it comes out and the style of the cutting. So I think, or the problem with the friction. And so both of those shuffles deal with that friction problem in quite a good way. One is by using speed in a new way that simulates friction, and the other is by essentially removing the friction, or at least reducing it from like out of 100 down to, I mean, you can already calculate it. You know, if you shuffle those, you know, each one of those points at some stage, there is a friction on both sides. When you take that to a block, you've now got almost nothing to go through. So those are the kind of the main problems with the push through shuffle, are the kind of friction parts. What we can do, like I said, is have this very blocky style action here and condition these as well if you want. So this conditioning cuts apply to both of those. So still have that conditioning dropping. And by the way, those conditioning cuts are all exactly the same thing. All I'm doing is I am cutting around a break. So come to the top, hold a break. This is basically like a double undercut now. I now cut half of the cards below that break, still holding my break. Drop those on top and then cut to the break. Okay. But done at full speed, these are great. Once you've got that first break, what's good about this is you can drop these on top. This is why I like this. Two of those cuts you drop. Once you've got that first break, you can drop those. It's very nice, and all you're doing is cutting around a simple break. So just by having a couple of those in first before you start that shuffle, now you do any of them. Let's imagine, for argument's sake, it's that block or that block through, or the block shuffle. You do that push through, you could have that same dropping action. Okay, so makes sense, I think. Both of those are push through shuffles, and hopefully, like I said, the first one reduces friction by going through slow, so I call it the slow through, and the second one has got that blocky style action. Hopefully both of those will kind of make a difference to those who maybe struggle with that aspects of the push through shuffle. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about those is that we're now going to do a push through shuffle that's a bit different. This is a little bit crazy. I call this the scattered push through. Okay, it's a bit nuts. All right, I like this a lot. So we're going to do this. So here goes. This is what this looks like. Probably, you know what, I'm probably going to end up actually shuffling these now. So this, right, do this, sorry. So I told you I knew it. Right, only joking, here we go. So this is the scattered push through, okay? And there's different ways of handling this. You could do this with a single card coming out, blocks coming out. I can show you different ways of actually engaging or re-engaging the packet by throwing them back in or pushing them back in. But the bottom line, again, let's use this for a second. Now, so the bottom line is when you do this shuffle, right? Let's say I'm really shuffling these. When you do a strip action, this is what we're simulating: shuffling and stripping those cards. Okay, that's what we're simulating. What we're going to do is, as we're stripping these cards, we're going to basically create the impression that cards accidentally just like fly out somehow. And then we're just going to pick these up and throw them back in. All right. That's what this is, right? This. Well, okay. Okay, that's what this is. So if you do this with these in order. Whoops. Okay. There we go. All right. Now, there's another way we can do this. Let's just do a couple of these first, because I haven't done this particular one. Whoops, hang on. So it's something like this. Okay. Now I'm hoping. Oh, there we go. Oh, someone's won a bet. I knew I'd messed that up. There's a 7 of clubs out of position. Look at that cheeky little 7 of clubs. Someone's won whatever was bet. So, well done. So, as long as we got past Sarah's point, that's all that matters. Now, so, damn you, 7 of clubs. I shall forever have. It was my favourite card until that very moment. I wanted to get through another one with not one prize. I knew it in that one. I was like, I could feel it. Look, we'll go through what I was trying to do, right? So I could feel it in doing that. This is what one I haven't done in a while. There we go, right? So now, okay. Now, what's actually happening here is these are basically, you're doing a push through. And as these are doing this push through like this, these are going to be thrown out, okay? And you're going to false strip these, dropping, leaving a step. I'm going to pick these up, lift up on that step, and throw them back into that position, right? I'll go through the exact handling on that so you can see that in a second. But the point with this is just to get that, the shuffle action coming in. Oh, someone hasn't turned their mic off. I can hear some madness going on. Is to get the shuffle action coming in, and then in that action, some come flying out. And you're trying to make it look as haphazard as possible, right? But we're going to deal with how to actually get this right in a second, okay? Right, so this is the top section. We're doing the push through, okay? So imagine this, just run through this a couple of times. Right, just doing a standard push through shuffle, okay? But in this action, as I go through, I'm going to release cards from the bottom of this packet. Now, what's tricky about this is actually trying to get it so that you don't do it too much. You want to try and get it so it happens in the natural action of that first shuffle, right, like that, okay? I'm going to pick these up. I'm going to pick up here, and I'm going to be throwing these back into this position inside here, right? So let's do that full speed. Like this, throw in like this, okay? Okay. So what happens is this: we cut off to one side, to the left. I'm going to shuffle like this. I'm going to push through. And you can do the slow through if you want. And then as I start stripping these out, those come off the bottom. Now, as I come back to here, I'm going to do strips from the bottom here. And this first packet goes all the way over there. And I do a couple more bottom strips. Okay. Now I can reach over and pick these up. I can lift up on this packet that was stripped all the way out and throw those into that section. So everything remains in order, okay? You would only, now, what I wouldn't advise doing is every time you do a shuffle doing this. So what this is one of those things that you throw in, if you're doing a push through on the table, you throw it in once, then it really does look like a mistake. Now, the one where I felt a card slip, I'll show you what that is as well. I actually started to use the wrong technique. That's why it actually happened. It's what happens when you end up doing all these variations of push-throughs. I actually started doing the wrong technique. So what it should, I started doing the block through, the block shuffle. What this means is if I do the block, when I start doing this, everything feels wrong when I come out, and I threw it out like this, and I didn't know where I was at. It just felt weird. So, which I don't want to do, even though that worked there. But the point is this: I'm going to do this, push through, and the same thing. I'm going to throw out, strip. Everything's the same. Now I could pick these up right now and throw them in, lift up here. Okay. So here I've got the 2 of hearts. Okay. So this will be the 3. Oops, what's happening now? Oh, no, sorry. No, I was right. This is the 6. Sorry, yes. So this is the 6. And this is the 7. Okay. Now what's going to happen is, like I said, if I lift up on this big stepped out portion, I throw those in, everything's in order, right? So that whole packet that's come from the middle has to go in this gap, this little mouth. But what we're going to do instead is, as we throw this out, this is the point. Now it's perfect. And before I tried to fake it. So I only do this variation when this packet really spreads. Because now when it really spreads, it might look better from here. There we go. This is better. When it really spreads, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it over like this. Right? And what this does, it kind of, I'm not trying to square it up. I just pull these top cards over. And I move it all like this. And what this is basically now is like a wedge. See what I mean? Like most of that, it's like that middle part of this packet is squirted out this way. And this is very thin here. So what it means is I could just grab this, and all I've got to do is lift up and hit where these cards are going to go in. I've just got to hit this portion here. And if I just lift in and hit it, it's like it's a pyramid, like this. So this thin section, as soon as it hits in, I've only got to put it in a tiny bit. And now look at this from even the front. This looks like this is going in all over, all the way through. And yet, yeah, everything is still in order. What I tried to do is I tried to fake it, because when I did this, I did the block shuffle accidentally, which meant when I threw this out, this landed as a block. So when I tried to fake it by like moving it over more and just to show you the move, but the reality is that's not how I do it. I only ever do this variation if, when I throw this out, that packet really spreads. So now I can get this, shove this into that gap like that, and then this will all be in order. So if that first packet really spreads, sometimes I can pull it back in and then throw it in. That said, it doesn't necessarily make it any better. It's just sometimes it creates more like chaos and it feels like more madness is going on. But often, like I said, I'll just throw this out, pick these up and throw these into that mouth, creating that kind of order in this position. Okay, so I'll go over that one more time just from above, just so you can see that. Like I said, these are 3 variations of that push through. We've got the one where we're slowing down, the slow through. We've got this block version. Now, both, well, this slow idea can still apply to this. This idea of going through slowly can still apply. You can still just do it slowly. But the moment you start coming out, you throw those from the bottom of this half, right? To let it go, you just want to just a little squeeze, right? Almost started going into frozen territory there, but just a little squeeze and let some of those come out. And now bottom strip, pick up and throw in, right? I'll give you just a quick tip, and like you see, these will not, I'll do this at full speed. Okay. Right. And here's a quick tip for picking up on that extended card and actually putting that first extended card down, because it'll feel very precarious. Whereas in reality, you can be quite open with it. There's no, you can do it all by feel, and you don't really have to worry. So what happens is, as you do this push through, these come out. And by the way, I tend to keep, as this comes out, to let it go. I don't tend to throw my arm out and drop. What I tend to do is keep this close to the ground, close to the surface, and my hand brushes the surface, and I just let some come off. So they're very close to the table. You know, what I'm not doing is keeping them up and dropping them from a great height. So as these go through, these are hugging the table surface. And as they come through, some come off the bottom. Yeah, now as I come back, we're now going to do bottom strips from here. And that first packet I leave sticking way out. I mean, literally, I leave it sticking out that far, like half a deck. Because look, if you could throw a pack of cards that sticks out like that, this kind of makes sense. It doesn't even matter if it looks like this. Okay. The first time you watched me do it, it wouldn't have registered. So now when I come down here, I only grip this. I don't go anywhere close to the deck. I only lift at the out. So the only part of my hand which is touching the deck is here. Now I put my hand here, not exactly like this, but I lay it on the deck so it keeps it still. And my fingers are out here and I lift at this point. And then I open it up and I really allow you to see those go inside. All right. And these come down on top, right? You want them to see that bit happen. Okay. So here, push through. You could do this slow if you want. Out, pick up, throw it. Okay. Yeah, great. Okay. So that is the scattered push through. It is a little bit tricky to do. But I think hopefully some of those kind of techniques might make that feel a little bit better. But it is a little bit tricky to manage the throwing of that packet. It does feel a bit weird when you first start. The thing, like always, is less. Maybe also to start by looking at this, your normal stripping action. You know, look at that normal strip action that you do. All right, so just look at either that way, or you could have this way, you know, from a, sorry, weird like that, doesn't it? So it could be more down or more around, but just look at that normal strip action or cutting action. Look at that. Not too fast. You've got a nice amount of kind of casualness riding in the middle of it. Okay, really do that. Just get used to that action. When you do that, when you release, it shouldn't feel like any big jerking action happens in the middle of that. Really, there will be some, but it's just a little. Well, and look there, you can see as it didn't even fully leave, but I can still see that they're separated, so I can still grip and throw those into that gap. Okay, so look at this action, shuffle. When they go through each other, very slow. Same style, and they come out at that moment. You're not coming all the way to here and dropping. You're kind of dropping them in the action of moving those forward, picking them up and throwing them in. Okay, cool. It's a scattered push through. It's a real fun little shuffle. It looks real. It looks like a mistake has happened. So I think it's particularly good when playing with an effect where you know, if there's definitely a huge amount of order involved, you know what I mean? Like where you want to create that chaos, but maybe you don't want to have like a really messy handling of everything. It kind of feels like a mistake. And that's why I like it. It's almost like naturally occurring mess where, you know, it's kind of, you've not tried to be stylistically messy. It's like mess that has come out of a normal procedure. I think that's why I like it so much. So we're now going to look at a thing that I basically think of this as an open Zara shuffle, really, to some extent. And it's just a standard, to some extent, a standard Zara shuffle, but it's just done in a slightly different way. So there's a couple of things about this that I think you will like. Right, so let's try it from, let's maybe do it here. We'll see how I feel. Okay, oops, this is me doing it badly. Right, let me do this better. Okay, like this, there we go. And this stays in order. Okay, now what I particularly like about this is that there's no cover cards going on. You're basically just putting one whole half like this back on top of the other half. That's it. Okay, so you're just putting the half on here, shuffling, putting it back on top. So this is almost like what people think of often as like a shank shuffle. Even though it's not necessarily the original shank shuffle, there's a lot of kind of stuff surrounding that. There's also the old gambler's full shuffle. A lot of these old shuffles that rely on just half going immediately on top. The reason I call this an open Zarrow is that I use exactly the same handling that I use for a Zarrow, exactly the same action, but just with this handling. I'm not even trying to cover it. Okay, so what I mean by that is normally when you have these types of more shank style actions, there's normally a lot more cover. I'm doing exactly what I do for a normal Zarrow shuffle, but put it straight on top. Again, I'll get into some other little bits and pieces that we can do with this. So what I mean by that is this: I'm going to shuffle here, push down, and I just immediately, it's the same action. But yeah, this is just half here. I've just still got two halves. Okay, so I'm just going to do this from the top for now. We'll get into some other covers for this in a second. I'm just going to cover it like this, right? And immediately just start shuffling and pushing these on top. Okay. And to me, there's a number of things that I really love about this. To me, it just feels like the type of action that it looks to me and feels like a shuffle with not too much cover. It doesn't feel like anything else is happening. You don't have to do any strip outs. You know, it looks like a shuffle, feels like a shuffle. You don't, like I said, have to do other things before or after it, but you can if you want. And so you've got the option to throw in more cuts now if you wanted to, but you're in a really cool position. So like I said, you just shuffle those colts. Let me do that a bit further back here. Sorry, here we go. So if we shuffle like this and these go in here or from here, we're going to shuffle like this and push these in, or from here, shuffle like this and push these in, okay? And nothing changes. All right. Now, a couple of things about this. If you think about it, when we're used to looking at full shuffles, right, we're very much used to like really analyzing how clean moments are. What you really want is something that you can just do without thinking about. So you want to be able to kind of talk, do something by feel if possible. It allows you to be a lot more kind of relaxed and yet just get that flowing and not have to worry about it. And so what you want is to take out all of the problems. And there's a couple of extra subtlety or any of the possible things. Often with a Zarrow shuffle, it looks very tense or it can look very precious. All right. And there's some management that you often have to do before or after. With this, I don't. I can just literally come here, shuffle. It's the same action as the Zarrow shuffle. I'm now going straight on top of those like this. Okay. And this whole half is just going on top, right? Now there's some other cool things that we can do with this. Okay, you'll have noticed that when I come here now, I squared all these cards in. All right, now what's happening here is as I'm moving my hand around to square, okay, all of these are already squared basically. Okay, they're already there. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lift up some of these and I'm gonna pull the whole bottom half of the deck this way as I move around. Now this looks like I'm squaring those cards in. Okay, so it means that you can shuffle these in and do this. So you get this sense of those cards being shuffled into each other when of course they haven't. All right, so now there's a couple of little bits and pieces that I like with this. Often what I'll do is, again, remember we talked about these types of things, doing these things first. Now we could do exactly the same stuff. We could throw in some of these conditioning cuts first so that we can throw one cut, hold a break, another cut and hold a break, okay? And now all I've got to do is now pull out this bottom half and shuffle it on top. And I like that because you see these top cards get lost. So these now go on top and now everything is now in order, okay? So instead of just shuffling the top straight onto the top where, you know, essentially you would, you know, those are just not changing. You want to be able to see the top card move if possible. Now, what you can also do is take this bottom section, shuffle it on top, and now you can cut the deck because you've now cut back to that position, okay? So just because you've got this very simple, either the bottom half is going on top, yes, let's do it this way. Either the bottom half is going on top, and now I can cut the deck, or you can cut that to the bottom first, or halfway in first, And now when we shuffle those together, now everything's going back in order. Okay. This is a very, very, for me, it's like out of all the shuffles I've learned over the years, to me, this has been one of the most practical because you can do it on pretty much any condition, any surface that you can. So I'll show you how. So this is the handling that you can use for going onto any surface. It doesn't matter what you do this on. You could do it on anything. You could do it on a plastic surface if you needed to. So this is not where you want to be doing Zarro shuffle, all these types of shuffles, right? But you don't have to worry because the way in which this is structured, when you lift these off and you get to this corner, I'm going to rest these for a split second on the edge here of the deck, which means I can lift. They're not actually touching the surface. I can lift them off very easily. So I lift to the corner, and now when I start shuffling, I put a bed down first. So now when I'm going to remove these and put these on top, when I lift here, this is already off the surface. These are already off the surface. So I can now immediately lift them. These now sink down and these can go on top. Okay. So now it's very easy to put those straight on. Okay. Very, very extremely simple and extremely practical to get that looking right. Okay, like I said, how you cut the deck is going to allow you to either cut at the end cleanly if you wanted to do a clean cut at the end, or not. You could do the cuts first and do this, and now everything's in order. Or you could take this bottom half, shuffle it up to the top, and now I can cut cleanly at the end and keep everything in order. Or we could do this bottom half, shuffle it to the top, and now we can do a series. You can cut that first packet off and now do false strips. It's doing exactly the same thing because you're dealing with two halves of the deck, all right? So this is what I call this, like an open Zarro, basically. But you just, for me, you don't need to cover it in any extra way. You could just do that standard Zarro handling, but just direct to the top, okay? And it's instantaneous, right? Like that. Okay. And it doesn't feel too rushed, doesn't feel too precious. I feel it looks and feels like a shuffle. You want to throw in any other cuts you can, any other false cuts, false strips. It doesn't really matter. It's all going to be waiting there at the end, right? I really like it. Like I said, it's also practical because you don't have to worry about the surface. So if you want to play with this, I would say if you're going to play with the Zarro shuffle will also open up this, which you don't have to worry about with the Zarro. I don't have to worry about shuffling in under cover and getting this kind of covered action here and what we do before or afterwards, which again, the Zarro shuffle looks great. It really does. But often there are other things that you have to manage with the Zarro. Okay, like you can't do it like that straight away because it's going to be going under some of these cards here. You see what I mean? So if often what you've got to do is either do a block strip out, or you have to do some transfer, or do it twice. So you'd have to do this under, say, 4 cards, hold that break, come back, do it under 4 again, you know, then cut to that. You know, this. So sometimes I just find that in performance or using these things practically, as great as those shuffles are, often there's too much to think about, I find, or you've got to pay attention. Whereas when you can look up and do exactly the same thing and not really care and know that same action will just work every time, and peripherally it looks like a shuffle. If someone's looking at it, it looks like a shuffle, and I just don't have to pay any attention to it, and yet those will be in order. And I just know that they're there. So this is, to me, one of the most practical things. And it means I don't have to have the complication that can come with some push-throughs and strip-outs. Push-throughs and strip-outs can be a real problem sometimes if they stick or bind. So I'm always trying to deal with friction in different ways, because with the best of, you know, if you get in stroke and you sit down practicing over and over again, you get it looking sweet, and you film that, you know, take 9, and it looks perfect, then fine. But you might not have done a shuffle in hours or days, right? And all of a sudden you need to do that shuffle at that moment. Are you always going to rely on that push through or that strip out, or how are you going to deal with some of those problems? So I find that things like looking at this block shuffle where everything's much more simpler can be easy. And also looking at this handling of the Zarrow shuffle immediately, or this like open Zarrow, I know that I'm going to have no problems with it whatsoever. So I really recommend kind of studying that. And like I said, if you want to get this action down, exactly what happens here, really start looking at the Zarrow. So we're here like this, we drop a little bit forward, we then pick these up, one goes slightly backwards, one goes slightly forwards as they come in on top. But really, instead of like using your time up with going through exactly that here, if you study Zarrow's original Zarrow handling for the Zarrow shuffle, the action that he used, I mean, Zarrow actually quite often would be a lot more open with it and hold it at the ends, and you can do that and it will still work. I prefer to just be a little bit more closed because it's where I shuffle anyway. So I don't want to kind of suddenly go to the end to do this, but it doesn't change the technique at all. You can still do exactly that. If you wanted to keep this more open at the end like that, you can. All right. But to me, this looks great because, like I said, you can look up. All right. And you can talk and do everything else and still hit this. Right. So, oh, I nearly forgot. There is something else in that we're going to come back to. Right. We're going to come back to the first part of that old school shuffle. So before I forget, this old school shuffle that we talked about at the beginning, where we were in this position and doing this, the reason I like this is because now we end up in this position where we can do this. And I love this shuffle. And this is basically exactly that shuffle we've just done there, that open, what I call open Zarrow shuffle. It's no different, but it's just done from this position. And there's something about this position which I really like, the deceptiveness of it, and it almost everything kind of naturally covers itself. Okay. It really feels like a shuffle was taking place, and yet they, you know, it was still in perfect order. And it's the reason I like this old school shuffle is because you can have the cards in the hands, do this shuffle procedure that we said before. Now they're on the table. We can now do this to continue it. You can even do false strips. It's all very covered because the distance is so small. Right? It's the same thing. We're going to shuffle these corners, move over a bit, lift them all up and go straight on top. But I just feel that the kind of flow, there's also something very nice with this with height. I'll show you what I mean. So when you're normally riffling in this position here, the deck is long this way, and so the height, it's hard to describe. It's like a shallow pyramid. Okay. When you put the deck on its side, it feels like a steeper pyramid because you have to kind of lift these up higher. And as a result of that, when you come down and these immediately tuck on top, it feels like you've created like the space of the shuffle is like you've made grown the attention in a higher dimension and then quickly snuck on underneath it. So it feels like you've got like a wider space where you can execute this move. I don't know if I'm explaining myself correctly. It just feels like this lifting up higher makes the shuffle feel like it's this high, and you very quickly get in on top. And so I kind of like this position. So you can have them in the hands, do this shuffle, do another one on the table, and both of those flow together really nicely. That's why I like that particular sequence. Now, so that's what that was. And like I said, you could still go into, oh, there's another thing, by the way, is that once you've done this old school shuffle coming on top, you could do this here. Like I said, now you can either pick these up and they're in the right position. You don't have to turn anything. You don't have to turn the deck first, pick them up, they're already there. Or you can spread, okay? So there's something about it that just feels right, okay? So anyway, that's me waffling about those things. But there's something about, in my opinion, the bolder moves that I think there's something in them that I feel they're better because a lot of other things has to come into other things have to come into play. So we have to look at, you know, how we're talking to someone, naturalness, softness, all that stuff comes in, and those bolder moves, they're softer. When you look at often the kind of push throughs and strip outs, they're a lot more tense. There's something. It's like the little beacons go off in them. So it's very. I find I've been fooled badly with those bolder style shuffles where someone has caught me very badly with them, but I've never really been properly fooled by like a push through or strip out. I kind of know it's happened. You know what I mean? Whereas those softer, bolder ones have caught me, and especially by people I didn't expect to be able to do them. But yeah, they've caught me. So it's quite a few shuffles to think about, and some interesting stuff to do with friction, timing, how we're making them feel more natural and overcoming some of those initial problems, looking at some of those bolder moves as well as some kind of refined and more interesting ideas. So now we're going to kind of explore an effect, and we're not going to go into tremendous detail with the effect to some extent, because it's you already know what's happening. Well, it's not the tremendous detail, but you kind of know what we'll be doing. So it's like the worst way in the world to do this stuff. I wonder what possible methodology you could be using, Benjamin. Well, maybe it's all that non-shuffling you've been doing. So let's just check to make sure these are all in position, which they are. Right, okay. It's probably the worst thing to do at the beginning of the effect as well. Just letting you know. But what we're going to do is I want to explore what often I see with kind of full shuffle effects. All right, and I think there's with the most bold example, which is this. You shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. Let's say you produce 4 aces, boom, boom, and then you go bang, the whole deck's in order, right? And really what you've done is you have a sequence of effects that kind of deal with that. Now, we could go through a whole series of routines that aren't really in the gamut of this course, which is just purely about full shuffling. Some principles and deal matrices and all other kinds of stuff, which is clever. But it's not really kind of in the gamut of this. So what I'm going to do is explore the idea of just using full shuffles to affect this. How can you make someone believe that those cards are mixed? And I think it's not enough to just do lots of full shuffles, because at the end, when you spread them and show that they're all in new deck order, people just think, well, you didn't shuffle them. There's something about the actual revelation at the end which kind of somehow suggests they haven't been shuffled. So I'm just going to kind of give you a number of tips when you're dealing with these types of effects where you end in new deck order to consider that you might enjoy. All right, so I'm going to kind of half perform this because it's weird and there's no one here. It's just pixels. And you know what I'm doing, but you'll get it. So that's what I say. Center myself and imagine I'm performing. Right. So often, my granddad once said, no, I don't have one. He's dead. It's not true. I've just never seen him since I was 6. It's not true either. I'm rambling. Now, it's fine. It's what Fanta does to me. Now, so here's what I'm going to say. Often when someone asks you about like gambling, sleight of hand, card magic, they know that sleight of hand is one of those things that exist. They understand that you can manipulate cards. And of course, it's possible. It is possible to do so. But what people don't often think about is that there's something really interesting going on with, say, for example, if you were to have a Rubik's Cube, right? The very means that you use to mix this cube, right? Well, however it is, it doesn't matter. But the very means you use to mix it is like the same way in which you try and unmix it, the way in which you try and solve it. It's the exact same thing. Well, the thing is, you can do that with playing cards, right? But you need some information. What I mean by that is that if you do this with your hands face, if you do this face down, you don't actually look at these cards, there's nothing I can do, right? If I can only see the backs, right, then there's nothing, I can't manipulate anything. But if I get the opportunity to look inside, then you can start playing with some of those orders and maybe you can start pulling things out and moving them around. So one of those things is this. You might be able to see this, but as you're doing this and moving these, look, I can flip these up. I can look inside for a split second and see cards. See here? So you can actually see cards inside, right? That's a really useful thing, which you can do in this overhand position. As soon as you start putting the cards like this, you can't see them yet, but the moment you're springing, you can look inside and you can see, all right? At least aspects of that. But I mean, you can even see that yourself. All right, so look. Okay. As soon as you can see, you can start manipulating some of those orders. Now I'm going to try and memorize just a few bunches of those orders. All right. In fact, let's do this from here so you can see. We'll just start just playing with a little bit of that. Now, let's imagine we'll start from a random position to some extent. I'll give myself a little bit of information and then we'll start from some kind of random position. All right. Now, let's say we'll take, look at this. So a 10. All right, let's look at this. We'll look at a 10. I'll try and do something with this 10. So I might have to use a few. Okay. It's not going to be the easiest thing to do, but we'll try this here. See if we can get again a jack. That's good. It's always good. It's a good hand in blackjack. No, it's a 20. It's fine. Let's see if we can get here. See now this is starting to get interesting. But I'm going to now need to look at a few of these cards. Yeah. Let's go. This is hard to know now. I'm going to try this one. Try a bit here. I think. Yeah. Oh, there we go. It's useful. Let's go with what do I need now? I need an ace. I have to try and look in here as much as possible. I think there's one about there. I think it was there. Yeah, there we go. So that's a royal flush. It's not bad. It's not bad. But look, let's put this back. Look, we'll leave that there. We'll put these in a different position. We'll get rid of those for a second. Let's try and do something else. But this is the point. You have to deal with some of these positions. You have to be able to look inside and do something. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. So let's try now. Let's try and look for something else. Sorry. Let's try this. All right. 2. It's 1 off what I wanted. Let's go. I was going to try and hit. Let's go here. And ace. It's not bad. I'll try and get these so you can see. This is tricky. There we go. There's a 3. Okay, no. Oh, there we go. 4, 5. There we go. 6. Yep. 7. There we go. I think you could see where this is going, probably. I can't tell where the edge of the table is. There we go. 7. There's an 8. Now this is a nice one because I'm going to try and clean cut to this one. There we go. There's a 9. 10, Jack, Queen, and a King. There we go. Nice. Yay. Stunned silence. Okay. Now this next bit's a bit weird because I need 2 more shuffles. I need to look once. I need 2 more shuffles. Okay, not including that one. That was just a freebie. Actually, I needed 3. I just going to throw that one in. But I need 2 more shuffles, a glimpse, and 1 cut. Means I need to look inside and do something. So you're gonna have to bear with me 1 second. So I'm gonna go here. Let's actually try this at an angle that works for you instead of when you don't have a camera. Right, I'm gonna go there. I think I might be able to do this here. Let's try. So what this should mean, what I've tried to do now is reposition as many of these as possible. So I should have an ace, and then this should be a 2, and a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7. All the way through. Could have just spread them face up then. Much quicker. Yeah, but I wouldn't have extended it towards the end. That's all of those in that position. Yay! Right, so there's a reason I wanted to talk about this type of effect. And it's a very weird thing to do on here. We understand what they're doing. We're not, this is for people like us, or we get it. But there's a number of things that I wanted to talk about in that, which is that I wanted you want to try and create the idea that you're having to reposition cards, not they're just all in the same order. The moment you spread the cards like this, what you basically say is you didn't shuffle them. I think a lot of the time, I don't think you can still get a great reaction if they're all back in order, but I think a lot of the time when you do this, it's almost too much. It's almost too perfect. So what you want to do is I try and use this idea of saying to people, you know, well, if you shuffle, you know, obviously mixes the cards, but what you need is the very thing that you are using, you can actually use to get information. So imagine doing a Rubik's Cube, you mix it, right? And I want them to have that idea, some visual thing in their mind of mixing a Rubik's Cube up. But what you want to do sometimes is you can use information, the very methods you use to mix it, the same methods that you can use to organize it, right? You just have to have some information. So what I mean by that is I want them to think that all of these really are shuffles. I'm just reorganizing things. I think it's hard for us to escape from that because we understand what full shuffles are. We understand that shuffling isn't happening. I don't want that idea of shuffling isn't happening inside of their head. So we need to kind of have the idea that shuffling is doing something. So there's a number of, that's how we want to start, just like sow a bit of that seed. Then what we want is the ability to kind of mix up some of these shuffles. It's one of those things where you can break that rule. You notice how I did this Charlier shuffle in the hands, like this. I didn't do it up here, like we talked about doing that kind of advanced version, because these are in order, it would give something away. But we did this in the hands. We tried to use this. I love this because you're seeing when you do this shuffle, every time you do this, you can see different cards because you're seeing at different stages in this. So you can show and they can peek and see different things along the way. They're seeing different styles from the hands to the table. It's even though each one of those moments might be quite controlled, it creates this idea that you are searching, you are looking, right? Now in that, I'm also going to throw mistakes, intentional. I mean by that is, I did this a couple of times. I'm looking at the exact one I want, which is the jack, right? Let's imagine this. So if we're in this situation, let's say, where am I? So let's do this, right? So the next one is the 9. I'm looking at the 9, but I go, oh, I just put it back and now do something else. Oh, there we go. Those mistakes are really good in these types of things because it's like you're searching or looking. So there's a few more times where you can do that, where you can throwing in those types of mistakes are really, really important because they sell that idea that you're having to look and having to search. So yeah, there's a lot of those bits and pieces that I think are really useful for those types of new deck order demonstrations. A lot of them, they're always really controlled, I feel like it's missing part of the power. And I don't necessarily want to go down a Leonard Green. I love Leonard and Leonard stuff, but I don't necessarily want to go down a kind of a road of having lots of chaos everywhere. So I would still want it to kind of fit whatever style I'm doing. So what you want to do is sell the idea psychologically. And I think that by, like I said, throwing in different styles of handling from the hands to the table, introducing a concept that they can latch onto that makes sense, the mixing of a cube, orders, the fact that you're using information, you are looking. So they might go, oh, that's where you're trying to look. Okay, so you're trying to look in the cards that I'm mixing. So you'll notice at one stage I did this, and I said, look, if you see, you'll be able to see them. So I'm even using a real angle on that particular shuffle to really flash this particular side, so that you can get that at its kind of full advantage. So it gives you the excuse to show things off. So look, you can see those running past. Look, you can actually see them. That's only quick. It's only for a second, but you'll actually see what I can see. Now think about that as an angle, as a reason for getting that angle. If you show that to someone, because I mean, this shuffle still looks great straight on. You can still get this looking great. But if you turn to someone and say, look inside, look, you can actually see those as they move past. Even with those in essentially new deck order, it is impossible to see that those are in that order. As soon as you do this, you're just seeing chaos. Okay, so you want to kind of in those things play with as much stuff moving as possible where it's controlled, throw in mistakes that aren't really mistakes, and introduce an idea to them that is kind of easy for them to latch onto visually, like a Rubik's Cube. Otherwise, it's kind of too much for them. And mix up those styles. Have some kind of have one mistake. You notice I threw in that scattered push through. So that feels like a genuine mistake that came out of the handling. And then there were procedural mistakes where I feel like I'd not located it, but none of it was done too much. Bearing in mind, this is like, it's not the greatest performance I've ever done. You know, this is me in this environment with no actual people here doing nothing, and there's nothing here. But the point is to say that once you have a lot of those styles of shuffles, you can do some really, really cool things. And like you could have had 4 aces on top and produced 4 aces and then produce the suit. I mean, there's lots of ways to go. I just wanted to kind of put something together that only used the moves that we've done throughout this series or this course. Yeah, so that was there's some cool things to think about, some really cool kind of techniques thrown in there, and hopefully, you know, this course has been fun, and hopefully it's given you some kind of new appreciation for certain techniques, new ways to approach stuff on the table. Some of you that maybe haven't approached certain techniques might now be willing to or look at exploring them. And hopefully encourage you just to kind of not shuffle cards in new ways. Right, so that is the end of that, and we're now going to go into the Q&A.
Okay, first one. What does the bed do in a shuffle? Why do you keep it there?
Well, there's a number of reasons. One, sometimes it allows if you put a bed down on this side and then these go on top, it allows you to be able to pick the other cards up off of the surface. So I'll do an example here where it's really bold so you can see it. So I'm going to put a really big bed down here. All right, so look, you can see the size difference here. See that? Now what this means is now, as a result of that, this section is now much easier to pick up off the table. This one, which is on the surface, is harder to pick up off the table. So often that bed, when you do something like a push through, it allows you to be able to get access to it much easier as it goes through the deck. All right, you can grab it and pick up on it easier. It just allows these hands to instantly grab it. You're not having to accidentally leave some cards behind. Okay.
When you're doing a cut, do you use a kind of slap when you're replacing the cards on top? Do you think that adds some kind of punctuation to what you're doing?
It's a good question. I'm not sure what I'm always trying to go for what's natural, and sometimes I feel that my handling's over stylized. Sometimes I feel that it's right. And over the last kind of few years, I feel that with these type of cut techniques, I don't like it when it's all clean like this. It's too controlled. I also don't like it. In fact, I'll use I did have another deck somewhere. I don't want to. Oh, there we go. Because I know I'll end up just shuffling them like this. I don't want this too fast. I think all of it has this very strange kind of gambling-esque style. And if you're going out as a croupier and creating like that kind of croupier-esque style, then maybe, but most people aren't. And so you want something that's kind of this halfway house where it looks and feels natural, and it still feels fluid, but it also has an element of randomness in it. It doesn't look perfectly square. So I often just have this like slight drop now, instead of like a slap. I also want to drop. So I do this with a lot of cuts. So I feel it's softer, it feels more random, and it introduces actual movement that feels less likely that you can control it. The slap, I don't know, there's something about it that often I don't like. So I try and introduce this like slight dropping action, but you don't want to make it too big. You just want it to be just nice and soft. So it feels very, very natural and relaxed.
When you're doing tabled cuts, do you pay attention to whether you cut the deck to the left or the right? Do you think it's important that the top card is seen to be buried in the shuffle?
I do think it's important, yes. Not always essential. It depends on what control you have with the audience. Like I was saying, if you do use this kind of open, like Zarro style, I could do this once and keep everything here, okay? and not have to worry. Okay. But it depends on what control you have with the audience and who you're showing it to and where their focus is. Because if, as you're talking and you look up and you split, at this moment, they don't know which side was which. So you could just do one shuffle if you want. Also, if you split it fast, you're not necessarily sure which side is which. But on the whole, if it's no extra effort and it doesn't introduce too much complexity at all, if you can show that the cards are mixing, then I would. So one of the simple ways that I do that is that I will just do a couple of cuts first. Right, now I'm holding a break. Right, so I'm going to cut some round, hold a break, cut some round, and leave it on top, still holding that break in the middle. So now when I pull these bottom cards out, these are the original top cards, and do that same sequence now. All they've seen is the top cards move. Just a couple of cuts, that same shuffle, and everything is still in order. So, or what you can do is you can split, take the bottom section out, shuffle it on top, but you now hold a break. And now I can do a clean cut. So I do think if you can allow the top cards to be, so basically if someone's watching and they are watching, they would see the top cards moving, right? But what you don't want is it to introduce too much complexity or too many extra sequences that cause you to somehow have to manage that too much. If you can just do it once and you can use relaxation, then do it. But if you can do it in a way that doesn't overcomplicate, then do. So you have to judge. And also, like, do you want a clean cut at the end or not? Or it does depend. But yeah, if you can do it, then I would try and do that.
Okay. You might have just answered this one, but I'm going to ask anyway. You often finish full shuffles sequences with a dead cut. Can you share the handling of that? Is that what you just spoke about? Do you always have a break?
Yeah, I mean, there are different ways to do it. One of the ways is this way with a break. So many of these types of sequences, you can end like this. Okay, so here, so just with these cuts, right? Oops, let me do this. So when you put a face-up card, it acts like a breather. Right, hang on. So let's do that like this. Okay, so or with a shuffle. Okay, exactly the same thing. Like this. Now I'm just holding a break and cutting to that break. The key is timing it. That's the key. So if you'll notice that with this, it doesn't look like that's what's happening. In fact, it looks like both of my hands are off and away from the deck. So I'm just timing when I'm taking that break. So I've got the break now. I'm going to hit this and take this hand away. And it almost looks like you do a dead cut, where I'm not. It's like a float cut, in fact. So it's like you're trying to hit at the exact moment you take away, right? But it's just, all right? Often what I do is I slow the actual cut down, okay? So what I mean by that is if you watch this here, the moment I start this, look, I slow everything down. So that you just feel like my one hand has come through and cut the deck, right? Whether it's being set up with a series of cuts, or like I said, if it's being set up with a shuffle, it feels very, very open. That cut is a very disarming and innocent thing if you can time it right.
A question about the push through. Do you have any tips on avoiding squaring the deck before doing the push through?
Right, yeah, it's an interesting one. So this is part of the reason for doing it slow as well, because if you do it slow, you've got just enough time to get everything. What you don't want is, I know what you're referring to, is this, getting everything square first and then going through and trying to do this. The whole point is you're trying to deceptively shuffle, so you don't want it to suddenly look very studied and very controlled. So one of the things is, as these are going in, this is very controlled from this position. Right, so everything's already in a very controlled position. So I split. If you're already splitting and the cards are, you're losing control here, it's not going to be good. So I make sure that when I split, I'm already square. As I drop, I make sure they're square. As I pick them up, I make sure they're square. as they go in, I make sure they're square. So now they're already essentially square. When I grip now, I grip at the same time. So, because otherwise, if you hit slightly different times, it's going to move those cards, okay? So everything comes together. Now, I can slowly start pushing this through. And when I do, like I said, initially, this is a very subtle thing, but sometimes there is a square, right? It's almost as you start to go through, just with these fingers, just one little squeeze here at the back, everything is now perfectly aligned before you carry on kind of going through. Okay, now you can then come through and then strip those out, and then you're home free. It is difficult to get right. Part of it is just developing a bit more control on the movement of them through. And like I said, if you look at this position here, if you were to take those and I push from the sides, they both move towards each other. If I push like this, they both do this. And yet I'm not touching any other part of that. And there's 26 cards in each half and none of them are moving. They're not splaying everywhere. Okay. So yeah, if I do that, they will. Look, boom, boom. All right. So it's not, in a way, if you've got the right control and you're hitting each side of the cards evenly with your fingers, as you push and start going through, they should just move together as a big block. Okay, but it will take a bit of practice, but it will be a lot of other stuff, a lot of little stuff. Like if you analyze it, you're breaking a bit and they'll be already off, and you'll be grabbing them with slightly uneven pressure, or it's that type of stuff that will be part of that reason. Whereas look, you notice the mirroring action almost is like my hands are doing almost the exact same thing at the same time with the same pressure. Everything's mirroring so that everything feels like it's, I'm doing obviously I'm actually split the wrong half to the wrong side then. I put the wrong half on top, but everything is mirroring. And the pressure is also, again, like a lot of techniques, the pressure is very, very light. If you over grip, if there's too much pressure, it will often move stuff and it binds, it's tighter. If it's light, like I said, when we're pushing these on the table, if I do that really fast or hit them, they'll go everywhere, but just very, very light and very slow. And they'll move right, or they should do.
Another question about laying in a bed. Do you riffle it off, or do you start your riffle higher up that packet so that it's already on the mat?
It's a good question. Most of the time, well, it depends. There's a couple of different occasions when you would do this. So I'll show it with another deck for a bottom stock control for now. So if you look at this, for example, can you tell if I'm riffling them off or hitting a bed, right? You can't tell. You just can't tell. Now, I basically was alternating. So this is riffle from bottom. I'm alternating those techniques, right? So they're almost identical. If you mirror your hands, they'll look identical. So there shouldn't really be too much of a look in the deceptiveness. So for here, this is halfway. So what I mean by that is as a block, right? Now I'm going to riffle. It's probably about the same size, right? I'll try and slow it down a bit. That's a riffle. Here's a block. So block, riffle. They're very similar. What it really depends on is what you're protecting. And like, you remember we talked about this block shuffle earlier? Right, to get these blocked positions. This is easier if we start halfway up, because now I don't want to have any possible interruption. If I start with this bottom section, I might, when I start riffling these, riffle quite a few in when I actually end up doing it, and actually might increase that friction. I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is start halfway and put them down together so I get this perfect blocked section of those cards. But it's all in the mirroring of those. It's all in the mirroring of that technique, all right? So when it comes to laying a bed or riffling at the same time, kind of depends what you're using it for, what you want to use it for. If you want to protect big old stock, it might be safer to start halfway. If you want to do it very deceptively, if you want to do it so it doesn't look like that at all, right? Here's a little sneaky tip. You can, if you just mentally try and lay a bed, but you try and time it right, you'll lay a bed. This can, let me explain. You are explaining, Ben. Explain better. Okay. Okay, me. Right. Here we go. So, Akkers, they are here. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm laying a bed of those aces, but I'm riffling both halves at the same time. I'm not starting halfway up, right? Okay, but watch, look out, look out. Okay, yeah, I know that those aces are protected, right? And yet I'm not trying, if you lay a bed, you'll always have that action. You'll always have this. I don't want that. I want it to look like that. Okay, it's a big, big difference. And so what you're going to do is not try to achieve it technically. Okay, you're going to do it psychologically. And what I mean by that is, as I split, I just, in my head, I don't try and lay the bed on this side. I just mentally think start on that side, but do not try to start enough to leave a bed. Just start there. Just for and as a result of that, if I do, it doesn't matter how fast you do it, your other side will not catch up. 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 cards will come off of that thumb in a nanosecond before your right hand starts. Trust me, you won't be able to catch it up. If I try to lay a bed that's the right amount, I'll lay either too many or it won't be enough. Whereas if I just know I'm going to start on that side, it will be like, I mean, that's what, like 11 cards or something. I mean, it's just, but yeah, it doesn't look like it, you know? So when it comes to laying a bed or starting halfway up, you've got to think about why you're using them, what benefits it's giving you with like friction. If it's giving you like, if you're trying to get them off the surface to do a push through, if you're just trying to protect the stock, and what the tells are. So either way, you want to try and make them look identical. They should look identical. It's just a question of, you know, when you shuffle it, you're like, oh, I want to keep the stock. That's off. So bang, like it's most tells like that are all coming from the internally. You're thinking, oh, I want to make sure because I've, you know, everyone's looking at me. And if at the end of this, there's no card there, I'm going to look foolish. So I'll definitely make sure I've left enough. In doing that, it will look like, yeah, and it's the internal part. So you just know, start on this side. Done. I mean, look, this is going to be huge. Look at that. Almost have a whole suit protected. So, yeah, nice little tip. That's how I've always done it. I think it's why the stock, it doesn't, if I do hold a bottom stock, yeah, it doesn't look like I'm holding a bottom stock. It looks like it's happening exactly the same time. So that's how I do it anyway.
With the Zarrow, do you keep the deck flat when you're doing the assembly of the two halves, or do you angle the deck to hide the two halves coming together?
Angle it a little bit. So here, it just, this goes back and this goes forward just a bit. Okay. I'm exaggerating it here. From the front, what I want to try and do is actually, if I had a lower angle on this camera, in fact, I might be able to even do that now. Actually, no, I'm not. You know, I thought about it for a second. I thought, no, the whole thing's going to come down. So as soon as I pick these up, okay, I'm going to angle these almost like this a little bit, but not like this, obviously, just a tiny bit. And you'll notice that this pushover isn't like this. I'm not trying to create cover. So it's not like this. What it is that in the action of coming down, it moves that over, okay? So it's not down and then over. It's over, okay? And then move those together, okay? And then, like I said, you can pull out and square those sides in. And if you do this first, okay, you get that nice thing of everything squaring up. So I'll do this very flat. This one goes back a little bit. This one goes forward a little bit. Just a little gap. Also, by the way, when you start, this is one way you do want to start this shuffle like halfway up. See this? It's not, I'm exaggerating it there for effect, but the reason is that when I take these out, this side collapses. So it goes down, which is what I want. So when I now come out, look, this side goes down a bit. So it means I don't have to raise this side up. Okay. All right. Anyway, it's if you look at it's tricky stuff. It's weird technical stuff but if you look at the Zarrow shuffle, really look at Zarrow shuffle resources. Zarrow shuffle is one of those things that's weird. I've talked about the Zarrow shuffle before. It's like I always refer to it as like trying to wrangle an eel by the tail. It's like sometimes it feels like a beautiful thing in your hands, and then other times it feels like it's got away from you. It's a very strange thing. Sometimes I look at it and think it's the most deceptive shuffle of all time, and other times I hate it. And I'm not talking about just my handling, any handling. And often people say, "Oh, have you seen so and so?" I've seen them all. I've seen them done brilliantly. It's just something about the Zarrow shuffle sometimes just looks wrong, even when it's done right. So whereas I find the bolder version of it, there's something about it for me which it feels better in my hands. It feels more practical. It feels less precious, but it's got the same action as the Zarrow, and I prefer it. So if you study Herb's original technique, there's a great video resource. It's just Herb Zarrow on the Zarrow. I think it's just on the Zarrow shuffle, or Herb Zarrow on the Zarrow shuffle or something. Mir Yedid production, I think. If you watch all of his tips, Herb's original tips for the Zarrow shuffle, just take all of those original tips, and then the actions and the movements, just take away the cover card and just go straight on. In 20 years of doing magic under every condition you can imagine, on card tables and environments and stages, just having that ability to just pick those cards up and just shuffle them on to every person imaginable, everyone around, those were just shuffled. So I want to have the ability to do it once and not have to do anything else. And that's what I like about those bold techniques. It opens up. We've talked about this in other courses, opening up your ability to do things if you want. If I want to cut, if I want to do strips, if I don't, if I want to do it once and leave it, if you want to do it twice, if you want to do cuts first or after, but operating from a very, very simple position. As a result, I can open that up. Often if you do the Zarrow shuffle, you either have to do a slip cut first, which often looks very weird, or you've got to do it under 3 or 4, which, because you've got to be precious, make sure it really is, because sometimes cards are thick, or sometimes you might not hit the right number. Then you might have to do it twice to get it all back in order. There's a lot of things that you sometimes have to manage with the shuffle, which I don't like those bits. They're not worth the trade-off for me. So yeah, that's that.
With the open Zarrow, are you beveling the left-hand half to make the unweave any easier?
Yes, I am. I've just looked myself to see what I'm doing. So just a bit. So you can see this here. It's beveled backwards. Now, the way I get that bevel is in the move, I'm exaggerating it now, is in this movement backwards, right? So I'm going to try and exaggerate it. Oops. That's essentially it. I mean, that's obviously terrible. But you see, there we go. It creates just this little slope. You see how it's not going the opposite direction, right? Now, as a result of that, is just enough. And also, as I lift up and shuffle, I'm actually doing this a bit. Not much. You won't notice it. But as a result now, look, you see that bottom card's come out. It doesn't matter. There's still this angled back section, okay? So I come back here. It's got this movement. It's tiny. You see that appearing here already? Now, as I riffle, I'm pulling these back just a little bit. And now this, oops, now this, and now this comes down. So now as these get picked up, they're already disengaged now. this half, they're already out, completely free. Okay, even though it looks like they were shuffled in. Then the moment that these start going back, these start coming forward and going on top, and both hands move together. All right, both hands move together, and then I keep this covered here so that I can just move that out and often just squeeze that in. Okay. Like that. But yes, there is a bevel.
I've got a couple of questions on the push through. Do you feel there are any benefits pushing through with the third or the fourth finger, or is it just personal preference?
I've seen it done expertly by different people. I'm not sure. It's hard to work out if there is objectively a better technique. I've seen it done brilliantly with both. I think once you get used to, I mean, you have more cover certainly if you use the forefinger. So if you're using the four fingers here, you're naturally having more cover. Okay, because all these fingers are coming over the front of the deck, so it's going to cover the deck more. Whereas if you use the third finger, there's going to be less cover because the hand's further back. I mean, look, this whole finger is quite a lot of distance covered by both hands. It's the width of a finger, which is basically, you know, almost 3/4 of an inch or an inch or something. That is going to take off. So the finger will create more cover. So, but sometimes with that more cover, things can get bunched up. You know, so I think there are bits of trade-off, and I think that if you've got the fluidity and the naturalness still in the technique, then I think it's great. There's a guy that was a card dealer that I used to know who was very, very good, and he, if I remember correctly, I believe he used the fourth finger. It looked great in his hands. I could never quite make it look right, so I've always used the third finger. The second finger is a bit too open, you know. You can get it right, and I have seen people use that second. This feels weird for me. I'm using the wrong fingers even. I've seen people use it and get it right. It can feel very, very open. The fourth often feels a little bit too covered for me. I don't like it. The third is just that Goldilocks zone for me. It just feels just right. It's that good mixture between too warm and too cold. It's just right. Goldilocks.
When you're doing the push through, do the bed and the block on top come from the same packet?
Again, it does depend on what you're doing with what shuffles and what you're trying to control. This is one of the tricky things about these types of shuffles is, do you cut left, do you cut right? And sometimes when I'm demonstrating these shuffles here, because I'm going through so many and I've got so many variations of bits and pieces I do, sometimes I literally forget which side I've cut. So if you're getting used to a certain routine, you'll know with this routine, I cut left, I do this. Now, if you look at this, it depends which side you strip out. Because if I'm going to strip out, if I strip with this hat, which I do, I'm going to want this, because they go through each other, I'm going to want the top cards to come out and go back to the top. So I'm going to take the top over here so that when they push through, and then I can false strip here. Then I can do that. Now, if I don't do that, let's say I take the bottom cards over here. I do this. Now, I can't do this stripping action because look, watch. It's like the packet stayed on top. Yeah. But if I take this bottom section over to this side, okay, what I can do now is do a clean cut. So I can cut forward. See what I mean? So what you'd want to do is with these types of techniques is start kind of familiarizing yourself with the actions. So this, when it's going to the opposite side, now I can do a clean cut of those cards forward. If not, and we're doing it the other way, then I want to get those coming out and around. It can look very confusing to someone that doesn't know because it all basically looks exactly the same. It's why there's a great, I mean, this is a great, look at this. Okay, this is a fantastic control. Okay, If any of you guys don't know what's good, it's a very old control. But it's being cut left and right. Okay. So I'll cut this way, and the next time I cut this way. And as a result, it becomes almost impossible to follow. It just feels like the top cards are mixing, yet nothing is changing. You're just cutting to the left and then cutting to the right and shuffling them normally. All right. What I mean by that, the reason I talk about that is because basically when you cut left and right, it's very difficult for anyone to really track which is which, especially if both hands move. It's different if you do this. Okay. You do this, and there have been really bad false cuts used like that in the past. Like it's an old gambling false cut that was like this, where the cards you pass off and the person would do this. Now it's not very sophisticated because basically there's you can't tell. And if your partner knows that you always basically cut this bottom half over here, then he knows that you can always do this. But if if you just do this and cut this out, you can do this. Now, obviously, we know that it kind of doesn't really feel that sophisticated, but the idea of it's really clever, because in the real world, you would never know if that was false or not. So the same thing happens with a riffle shuffle to some extent, that you both hands move. It's very difficult to tell which side's which. But you need to know when you do that what it means for your handling. So you need to know that when you cut left and right, if I'm cutting to the left and that's going through, it's going to have to come out to the left. But if it's going to the top, it's going there. But if I'm cutting out and then cutting, it's going to the bottom. It's one of those things that you just have, if you sit down and play with, turn half the deck face up, half the deck face down, and start playing with it. So if we turn half these face up on this side, so imagine this is the top half. I push through now. Straight away, you start getting a sense of, oh, okay, so now I would have to strip these on, and then I would have to cut those if I was to do that, all right? Or not bend, right? So, but if I cut to this side, oh yeah, look, they come straight to top. Okay. So you just start getting yourself familiar with beds, cutting left and right. Where it sometimes becomes confusing is if you split for double shuffles. Straight out here. So you can, instead of doing a cut immediately, you can split to the right, do a push through, split to the left. So now I'm just pushing those through as if I'm re-splitting for a shuffle each time. So you can organize these things. It's one of those things where you can get very confused with the techniques unless you have like a system for particular tricks. If you know with a particular trick, Triumph, whatever it is, you go, look, I do this, I cut to the left, I shuffle it in, it always does this. So it's almost like you associate it with tricks, like or effects, or you use it for that purpose. I know with this. So for me personally, I know that if I do a single cut, okay, I just know that I cut my bottom half over this side. Okay, so if we got 7 of diamonds, okay, nice clean cut, and we got my 7 of diamonds. So if I'm just doing a cut, I cut this way. I don't think about where the halves are. Okay, I cut this bottom half over this way. Right, if I'm doing a strip, I cut the top half over this way. Okay. Okay. It's just to do with what your hands are doing after, and you just have to basically familiarize yourself with those actions. Well done, Ben, on basically making that no clearer to anyone. But you understand what I mean.
Have you got any tips on bottom strips and making them look deceptive?
It's really difficult. I go through phases where my bottom strip looks very good, and other times where I don't feel it does. So I think that one of the tips I would have is try to actually have space. I see a lot of people I can't even try and, it almost looks like it's too fast. I really actually like the kind of, Steve Forte basically popularized this style of strip. Now, it's not necessarily Steve's, it comes from the gambling world, but this false strip action, he's popularized that way. But previously, it was always done downwards. And I actually, a lot of the time, I prefer it a lot of the time in terms of how it looks. It's easier to make that strip look better, I believe. Because look, there's more cover, and it's hard to tell. where it's come from. So a lot of the time, I think it's easier to make that look better. As soon as you start coming out this way, look, it's more exposed and it's hard to make it look as good. So we naturally want to do it faster. I don't necessarily think that's the answer. My solution for me is I slow down. I just do it once. So I often will put in one strip amongst real cuts. So look, real cut, come up, and I do one strip and then real cut. Because instead of doing it fast, these are all real cuts and there's just one fake in there. As soon as you go more than one, so if I'm going to do several now, something often doesn't look quite right in the technique. I don't quite like it. And so people often speed up. But if you just do one, I feel like it blends in. If you want to do multiples, I'll often say do this as it can. Sometimes it's just a little bit harder to get control though. It's hard to kind of set steps and stuff with this particular technique. But I think a lot of the time it can look much better if you were to do multiples. Yeah, principally it's very simple. It's taking cards from the bottom, but it's actually very tricky to get it looking right. It's very, very tricky. So yeah, just be aware of the angles and the positions. Slow down, do less of them, I think is often the answer.
Okay, we've got quite a few more questions, but we've got the Hangout as well, haven't we, to answer those?
Yeah, but we can answer some here if we want. It's not a problem.
Okay. So the routine that you ran through, the revelations that you did in that, would that routine always be the same? Do you change those revelations? And how would people go about learning some of those?
I couldn't do that routine again if I tried. I have no idea what my hands did. So I know that they produced cards. I know I did full shuffles and I was saying things, but the whole point in that for me was to play. So there was a couple, I think I did a revelation in there that was one that I did the other day on one of the other courses, which was this one where you pulled from me. I think I did that at one stage, but I could have done any others because I know where I'm producing cards from. So that's what I like, those types of routines. I should have actually said this when I was talking about it, but I like those routines because they are an opportunity to play. And so you could throw in all little like mistakes and bits and pieces and change levels and look and do different bits. And it's an opportunity for you to enjoy the process and feel like you're discovering as you go along. Right now I could do another shuffle if I want and now cut to that break and produce, maybe do like a Waving the Aces style production, maybe not. So I think that same for a multiple selection or multiple revelation. I think don't miss the opportunity to play. Yeah, but it does require learning a lot of stuff that you can pull from. But it's fun. Yeah.
Right, quick question on riffling. So when you do the riffle for the push through, is the bed on the same side as the top block? So are you keeping the bed on the same side as the top block?
So for the push through, let's do this. Now, they're opposites. Okay, because if you study these actions, I want a bed here. It depends, like I said, where you're going, like which direction you're cutting or stripping. But what I want is in this particular case, as I move through, I'm using this bed so I can hold this half. Okay, so I've got enough to hold it, but the other half has gone on top so that now you see this other half come out. You see, that's so basically staggering it, allows you to grip under, grip under on this side. This makes no sense here. I don't know where I'm at. Right, we do it here. There we go. So if you put one on top of the other like this, down in this section, which is off the table, you can grip it and hold it, right? But now as these pass through, you're going to see the top cards exchange, so one can come out. Okay, it still doesn't make sense. That doesn't even make sense to me. I don't know what I'm talking about. Do you know what it is? When it comes to push throughs and stuff like that, there isn't really a rule you really do have to kind of put the cards down, look at them and push them through each other, and really kind of, you have to intuitively understand, because most of the time if I'm doing those things, I just know if I'm going to do a cut, I know I need to put it on that side and then do this. And you just get used to, what it means. When you don't, you just think, oh God, is it left or right with a cut or with a strip or with a, there's no conscious part of it. It's, you just get used to understanding what the cards do. So like I say, put certain cards on top, put certain cards from the other half on top, put beds on certain sides, cut to left, cut to right, and really look at what happens and try to understand the process. Really try and get to a kind of intuitive and experiential understanding of what's happening. And then you might find just one that you need. Most of the time, most people do. They'll have one push-through technique and they go, yep, I cut to the left, I do this, and I do a cut. And that's might be all you need. But you need to first, before you do that, is play with all those different variations.
Someone's asked about block transfers. They said they get confused by the terminology. Can you briefly cover that, please?
Yeah, it is a bit weird. So I think it's been used in different ways in the past. I mean, you can argue that Zarro Shuffle, original Zarro Shuffle, is a block transfer here, because if a Zarro Shuffle is, I'm going to shuffle these here under a block on this side, I've transferred that block over onto this other half. You know, I think, hello, Mr. Square. I think that it basically comes down to when the way in which they've been used by Marlowe and many other people is what you're using them for. Sometimes you're doing that transfer specifically from one side to another in a push through or a strip out, and you're intentionally angling the packets and transferring a block from one side to the other. Most of the time you're just transferring either cover from one side as they go through each other. There are ways that you could use those for repositioning cards. But yeah, it's tricky, but it's basically you're just moving a block from a place that it was to another place, often to another packet as they pass through each other. So like you'll have a packet on this side, and as they go past, it moves from that side and actually goes onto the other side. So like a Zarro, you shuffle from this side and you go under some on this side, right? So I'm going to go under some on there. Technically, I've now transferred a block from here onto here. That's now a block transfer. Now, if I leave it there, or if I strip it out, it's not really a block transfer, is it? It's like temporarily a block transfer. So it's like, it depends what you do with them. So if you do two Zarro shuffles, for example, so lift these in. So I'm going to do this, go under 4. Now I've done a block transfer of 4 cards from this half onto this half. That means now to get everything back in order, I've got to again go under 4. And now I'm going to have to cut to keep everything in order. But I think also the terminology has been used differently by different people in the past, and it sounds cool. So I think, you know, someone with a block transfer, I'm like, it's just a bunch of cards moving at some stage. I think, I don't know.
What are your thoughts on close-up pads? Do you think it's important to have shuffles that will work when they're not available?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think some shuffles are definitely, it's why you'll notice in each of these sessions, there are definitely shuffles that are in there where I've talked about different surfaces, ones that are more practical, going from the hands to the table, not just doing loads of things that are really fine, refined shuffles on perfect surfaces where, you know, our fingers delicately and neatly go into this bed of beautiful velvet. Like, you don't always have that surface available. So to have a variety of different shuffles that you can do across the surface is massively important. That said, when it comes to working with close-up pads, you know, I always think, I've said this before, like I think it looks really weird if you're about to do something and you just like set down a close-up pad in this little area and then do stuff on this close-up pad. It's a barrier to the magic. It's like all the magic is brilliant. It just takes place in this little square. It kind of looks like the weirdest thing, like you're gonna suddenly start doing finger puppet parades on like your mini theater that you've laid out. It's this weird, strange thing. And here is my surface of which these cards are but players. Like I'm like, like everything about a close-up pad often just is like nails down a chalkboard to me. So outside of the practicality of a close-up pad, think about the fact you might look like a dork. So just think about that bit. Maybe, not saying you do, maybe. Blame the Fanta if you're offended. But now, if you notice here, this surface here it's a table. There's, you know, even though there is an edge, it's a table. So it doesn't feel like I don't have a mat on it. This is a table. So what you can do, right, with a mat is have a mega mat. So if your mat is so big that it covers the table, the edges now disappear and you just have a surface on a table. So often I don't have a problem with the mat. It's the edges of the mat. I don't like edges. So there's, but if you can find a surface at all times, it's good, then do. Like one of the things you want to kind of, if you want to hide a close-up mat, for example, a lot of the Spanish guys do this. So a lot of other people do it. If you put a mat under a tablecloth, so if there's a tablecloth naturally on a table, don't have your little mat on top. It looks terrible. Put it under the surface and then the tablecloth on top, and it will work perfectly fine. If you've got the bit of weight on the tablecloth as well, it's not too baggy. It will work fine under that surface and it will look fine. So yeah, it's weird, it's tricky, you know, practice on different surfaces. I used to have, I don't know if I've got it to hand. I used to have I do have somewhere. It's a close-up board, but one side is like a close-up surface and the other side is like a dice stacking surface, right? And so the reason I got that is because I used to flip it over and practice on it. So one side is like slidey, shiny, and the other side is normal. So you could pick up practice on both. Mexican turnovers on the dice stacking side were very, very tricky. But playing on different surfaces and then also basically learning, this idea is a very macho idea of, well, I just practice everything on like glass, therefore I can do everything. Do you bollocks? No, you don't. You know what? At the end of the day, you want to kind of get used to different surfaces, but also you want to bias towards your own skill set. There are some things, if you've got the surface, this particular technique will look better. There are some surfaces where I go, you know what, I'm not even going to chance it, just in case. I'm not going to chance doing a really fine strip out on this pub surface, which may be sodden with a bit of stout. So instead, I am going to, instead of raising merry hell at the fact that there is beer now in my cards, I will just do a different shuffle or alternate my technique. It's why I often am always talking about that ability to improvise or change techniques or be able to, you know, alter your stuff, is because you need to do that. I don't want, if you always have to control your conditions up, I lay down my mat, I do out these things. I think like what you might gain in your ability to execute the shuffles you want, you lose in everyone just kind of whispering behind your back. So about other stuff, I just think it looks insane. So yeah, there's an answer.
Last question.
Okay.
Do you have any drills so that we can chain shuffle these sequences together?
The shuffle sequences?
Yeah, so we can practice them in some kind of, I don't know, chain or drill.
Yep, do one after the other. There's a drill. There's a chain for you. I don't have any actual drills for outside of, like, you can do the same things. We talk about ball restrictions. There are other things that we could talk about with those things, but with these particular things, I don't really do that because I don't chain them together. There's no real benefit. It might be fun to chain the shuffles together and but when we start talking about that with other moves like top changes and double lifts, it makes sense that you might actually need those chained movements in performance. You're never going to need to flow from one full shuffle to the next. There's not going to be a real practical, functional reason, really. You might, but it's very unlikely. So if you want to practice them in that way, then do so. But I don't actually have any particular drills that are functionally make any sense.
Okay, that's great. That's us out.
Great. Okay, great. So I hope you enjoyed the No Shuffling Allowed course of the Deep Magic Seminars. Thank you for being here for all 4 of the sessions. I hope you've had fun. I hope you've learned some new techniques. I hope you've maybe been inspired to explore some new bits and pieces, and maybe you can continue not shuffling in deceptive ways. I'm desperately trying to think of something to say, and I have. I think I've said it all. Right. Thank you very much, guys. See you again soon. We're going to now go into the Hangout. Goodbye. Thank you for coming.